Okay, hello everyone. First of all, let's anyone who's got a glass, I think we just raise it to have a virtual cheers.
Cheers.
I apologise that my wife, we South African lockdown. It's 11 o'clock at night here at the moment, and with South African lockdown, we're not allowed out even to exercise. We're allowed to go to the shops one at a time, and the worst of all, we're not allowed to order or buy any wine or any booze or of that kind. So she's actually hidden the corkscrew, so I couldn't open my Pinotage, which is I think is understandable. So yeah, just to introduce the team we've got here. We're lucky to have a really good wine team, and we're sort of missing touring, and so we started doing some of these wine stories just amongst ourselves, and it's grown, and this is our first transatlantic one, so it's very exciting. So Justin, can you wave there, Justin? The man in.
Hello.
Yeah. So Justin was at Grand Roche a long time ago, like in the 90s, and at the time that was the #1 restaurant in South Africa, and it had the #1 wine list, and he was in charge of that. And since then, we call him our wine dealer, because he's legally smuggled wine over more borders than most. So he's exported and imported South African wines, and was in Belgium for 7 years, sort of spreading our wine everywhere. We've then got Josh. Where's Josh? Josh is our surfing sommelier. I don't know if anyone can see. This is how he normally does his wine tastings. So sorry, Josh, I know you, but Josh qualified as a lawyer, and then moved to London, and it wasn't his calling, so he came back and from the Constantia Valley, and really, so one of the most passionate people I know about is wine, and he headed up 2 wine farms, Constantia Udzig and Constantia Glen, and as the sort of head of the tasting room, and then has since sort of let loose on the guiding, taking people hiking, surfing, and then combining it with wine touring. And then someone I literally just connected with today, Lucian. So he was one of our very first sort of guides, and if you can see him on the screen, give us a wave, Lucian. His name's a bit of a giveaway. So he's the brother of the winemaker, and was born on the farm, and is we're now a private safari guide, traveling all over Africa, taking people on amazing private trips. And so with lockdown, we've managed to grab him this evening, and I think this is one of my favorite wine experiences that I've had. As one of the first ones when we launched New Frontier Escapes, and Lucian said, "Look, you've got to come for a walk onto my farm." So we pulled over, and someone else drove the vehicle around, and I pictured that we'd be walking through some vines onto his farm, and we'd been walking for an hour and a half. We'd found leopard footprints, porcupine quills. Lucian, what were you making us spit that day?
I think it was Klipspringer droppings or bokdrolspoeg.
Yeah, so but after an hour's walking, I said, when are we going to get on the farm? And he said, no, we've been on it for the last hour. So it's far more than just vines, and that region that Harry will talk about is quite unique and very different to the sort of Stellenbosch Franschhoek, which is the most popular areas. And then finally, and also Lucian's claim to fame. If anyone has seen National Geographic video of a porcupine fending off, I think it was 17 lionesses. It's the last time we looked, and that was about 4 years ago. It had 2 million views, and that was Lucian's video from the when he was working the Sabi Sands as a ranger. And then finally, Harry, give us a wave.
How's it?
So Harry lives. We're based out in Nordic on the South Peninsula, and we don't live too far away. Although we're not allowed to visit each other. Although I'm going to smuggle you some wine next week, Harry. So Harry is the 101st wine master ever. There's only 102. He's also head of the Cape Wine Academy. So Harry's the guy who's training the winemakers and really sort of taking Cape wine forward. And one of the things that where we really connected is Harry's an 8th generation Melck, which is one of the original settlers into South Africa, and his cousins still run the family wine farm that was it 1685, Harry?
Yeah.
Your Marathi, yeah. So the Marathi wine farm, which is probably I don't know if anyone's been there in here. It's in the Stellenbosch area, but it's got some of the best stories. So I'm going to hand over to Harry and let him take you on a wine journey. And this evening, please, if you've got questions, either type them in or as we go, just chip in.
Yeah, hi everyone, welcome. Before we start, let me just go through, I've done quite a few of these now, and this is, people think I'm head of Cape Wine Academy. Is it an education? It's not an education. And I'm not a wine master, I'm a Cape Wine master, so yes, 101 of them. But this is about sharing info, it's about storytelling and socializing whilst in the confines of this lockdown. I've started this actually before. In South Africa, we locked down just before the end of March. And so we've been doing this for a while with a whole lot of people we call the tribe. It's lighthearted, it's informative. So if you feel like asking a question, please do. We'll see if we can answer. Just my philosophy on wine is that wine was put on this earth as a social tool to bring people together, to help them engage in storytelling, to be used with food on the table with family and friends. And this ties in so well with the Beaumont family story, where the Beaumont family story is one where fact, fable, and fantasy merge, a story where wine, food, and family are always at the center of the narrative. A story in which a family filled with big-hearted and impassionate people strive to capture the essence of happiness, be in the cellar, the kitchen, or on the farmhouse stoep. Now, I've often been known to tell stories, and sometimes fantastical and sometimes truthful, but I was brought up by a mother who said I shouldn't let facts get in the way of a good story. So it's on that basis that I'm not sure how many of you guys know South Africa, especially when it comes in terms of wine production. But I'm just going to give you a little bit, and then we'll get down into Beaumont and get down into the Botrefia and the region where this delicious wine's made. So South Africa is the oldest of the new wine-producing wine regions in the world. It's over 360 years old. We had a guy, Jan van Riebeck, he popped into Cape Town, part of the Dutch East India Company, to set up a settlement for passing ships, to create food and for them, so that mainly because of scurvy. And he made the first wine with some grapes that he brought over 360 years ago. And then it spread to Constantia through a guy called Simon van der Stel, moved to Stellenbosch, then Drakenstein, which is our Paarl and our Franschhoek you may have heard of. And then his son set up in Somerset West. And then there were some farms, and Beaumont's one of them, that were around for a while, for the 1700s, and started wine closer to now. But only that whole area only really came into being as a wine producing destination post-apartheid, when mainly because of a company called KWV that we have privatized. It's just a huge co-op. So people could actually, or needed to actually produce their grapes for the market rather than just produce a whole lot and send them to get bought. So in South Africa winelands are set in a place where it's all about diversity. We've got numerous mountains with different aspects, different altitudes. We've got the influence of 2 oceans. We've got 360 years worth of wine tradition stories. We've got 11 official languages. We've got, we're known for our diversity. We thrive on our diversity. But in the wine regions, within this diversity, we've got regions that are specializing in specific wine styles. And you see that in Stellenbosch, where you've got Bordeaux blends, and you see that in Constantia, where you get white Bordeaux and you get Sauvignon Blanc. And then you've got the Overberg, Himmelenade, even the Botrevier, which are sort of Burgundian style. Botrevier is slightly different just because of their soils, and it's got a nice Walker Bay. It's got it's elevated, and it's got these cool breezes that come off the ocean, and it's got some amazing soils. South Africa has got some of the oldest soils in the world. So it's in that context where, yes, we are new wine world producing region, but we can make old world style, new world style, and we do a wide variety of grapes. What we're known for is Chenin Blanc and Pinotage. Chenin Blanc, it's a French grape. It came from the Loire Valley, but we've taken ownership of it. We produce more Chenin Blanc than the rest of the world put together. Chenin Blanc's a neutral grape, and it's really influenced by how the winemaker makes the wine. What I mean by that is that the flavors that come from a Chenin actually are to do more with the yeast you use, whether you use oak, whether you use stir on the lees, all of these kind of things. And because it's so versatile, you'll find that Chenin Blanc can be used for sparkling wine, it can be used for sweet wines, fortified wines, brandies, and it can go from dry all the way down to noble late harvest. And we make all these styles. And why Beaumont is so good is because they make two Chenins, but the one Chenin, the Hope Marguerite, is known for being one of the best Chenin Blancs in the country, and with the cool climate. In fact, Sebastian, Lucien's brother, who's the winemaker, is known as the Chenin Duke because he surfs and he makes this delicious wine. But we can talk about that when we go through the questions. The second grape that South Africa is known for is Pinotage. And this is actually South Africa's grape. It's a grape that is made by crossing Pinot Noir, which you may know, and Cinsault. Way back then it was called Hermitage. So Pinot Noir and Hermitage became Pinotage. Interestingly enough, tell me if I'm speaking too quickly. Interestingly enough, that the Pinot Noir was first grown on Murati, which Ingram mentioned earlier. And it was Professor Perald who crossed these two things, these two grapes, to create Pinotage. And I think there were either 4 or 6 vines at the university, and then he left. And there's another guy there, and one of the gardeners who was cleaning up the place thought they were weeds, and he was chopping them down. And he ran out and he said, no, don't do that. And I think there was maybe 1 or 2 left. And it's from those 1 or 2 that we've got Pinotage, which is South Africa's grape. And both Chenin Blanc and Pinotage in the past were overproduced and sometimes didn't make the best wines. But now with the quality and looking at making them more French style, more old world, and these 2 grapes are actually winning favor for South Africa internationally, where we're making some of the best Chenin Blancs in the world, and Pinotage is definitely coming to the table. And Chenin Blanc, Beaumont also makes this lovely Pinotage, which we've chosen today. So it's apt. And Beaumont's about the stories. We're about the stories. 2 South African grapes, which they do remarkably well. This is my favorite Pinotage in the country. It's a cool climate. It's very juicy, and I love it. And yeah, that's where we are. So
Harry, just quickly on, while we're talking about the Pinotage, and I see a lot of people have red-looking wine in their glasses. What are we looking at in the Beaumont Pinotage in particular?
Okay, well, let me tell you about what you're looking for in a normal Pinotage. And when you look at Pinotage, and Lucien, correct me if I'm wrong, but Pinotage has gone through a journey. When it first started, you've got Pinotage past, you've got Pinotage just past, sort of present, and you've got the Pinotage of the future. And the Pinotage in the past was overproduced, and it was made bulk because we had this organization, KWV, and they were guaranteed to buy your grapes. So you weren't really making the wine it costs more to make a wine for quality than it does just to produce high yields and as many as you can. And those pinotages came across quite harsh, a little bit of strip paint, and they weren't really good. And actually, they played a remarkable role in giving South Africa perception of cheap and cheerful. Same with Chenin Blanc. And then we went through a stage. In this context, we always had good producers of pinotage, but this is what people knew. And then in the present or the recent past, people were playing with American oaks and all these different type of oaks to get sort of coffees and chocolates within the pinotage. And they were hugely successful, but I think it became too much and people got tired of that. And now there's a definite focus, especially from the major pinotage producers, and Beaumont's one of them, yet they've been doing it for a while, is the aim to make pinotage like you'd make a Pinot Noir, and use French oak, get it refined, and it doesn't have to be full-bodied, it can be light-bodied, and actually make the pinotage according to the terroir that it is. In Stellenbosch, we've got the golden triangle of pinotage, and all our producers are there. There's Canon Corp won 100 points from an international critic, not for the pinotage, but for their Bordeaux blend. And they're brilliant, and there's Lavenier, and there's Bears Kloof, and there's a whole lot of pinotage people around. So what you're tasting in a normal pinotage, and I'm talking about the classic styles of the future, is I always get like a red berry fruit, but it's almost like a compote. So it's like a sort of a strawberry jam. You usually have fairly firm tannins, a nice acid structure, and it's a full-bodied wine. But it's more on the red fruit, and it's they're made in so many different styles. Let me talk about, Lucien, you can jump in, but the Beaumont Pinotage, I've got the 2016, only 60 barrels were made. And when I taste it, I get sort of like a plumminess to it, a red fruit to it. I get a little bit of spice, a little bit of the oaking spice, I think. And it's a refined. Pinotages can be heavy. This is refined. It's not as heavy. It's got a smoother tannin base, and it's a medium-bodied wine for me. So I don't know if that means anything to you. I always get told do the tasting up front, because then people can drink it and sort of see if they were right or if they were wrong. No one's right or wrong, but just enjoy it. And then we're getting now. We've zoomed from South African wine all the way down, and we're now going over the mountain, which a lot of the guys who do tours don't go to. And it's the cool wine producing region in South Africa. It's the Overberg, it's Elgin, it's Hemel and Ada, and there's a specific little place there called Botrivier. And this is where I'm going to ask Lucien to come in, because, well, Beaumont is very much a family farm, and the whole family lives on the farm. And there's the parents, and then there's three siblings with three children with married, and 7 grandchildren. Lucien?
Yeah, that's correct.
So you can.
I think I've lost count, actually.
Yeah. But Lucien, I'm just going to leave it up to you just to talk about Botrivier, or talk about Beaumont, and talk about the place.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, so in terms of zooming it in like that, that's so well done. And so Botrivier is basically an hour outside of Cape Town, in a southeasterly direction, to be exact, on the way to Hermanus. And a lot of people will argue that it's not Bot River, it's Botrivier, which is the Afrikaans term for it. And the name derived from the river that runs through the town, or past the town. Back in the day, it was a very rich grazing area for the Khoi pastoralist tribes. And when the Dutch arrived and they started setting up kind of outposts, they set up this outpost on the Botrivier, or Bot River, called Companies Drift. And that's where it comes from, the Dutch East Company, or Companies, or Companies Drift. And that's where this outpost was initially established. There was a lot of trade going on between the Khoi pastoralists and the Dutch in terms of dairy. And they named the river the Botrivier, or Butter River, because of the rich grazing area But the traditional Khoi name was the Kucha River, which has been unfortunately lost. And to fast forward a few years, so the farm was bought by my family, who was a farming family in the Elgin region, apple farming family. My parents bought the farm in the early 70s, and it was a very, very rundown farm. The buildings were falling apart, and there was really not much going on the farm. They'd built a cellar in I think the early 1900s, and they'd made a bit of wine. The previous owners had made some wine, but nothing ever very successful. And when my parents bought this near derelict farm, they really had to start from scratch, and they planted some vineyards, and being the Chenin Blanc and in fact the Pinotage, which are vineyards that still exist today, over 40 years of age, and still producing really good wines from them. But they built this farm up over their entire careers, and still to this day, it's still a process. But yeah, my parents, I guess ignorance was bliss in terms of making wine. So they played around with making wine. And as kids, we all got involved in stomping grapes and making a few bottles of wine, basically, and probably came out as vinegar for the most part. And at that stage, my parents were more focused on farming deciduous fruits such as nectarines and apricots and pears, and that was going for the kind of export market. And as Harriet mentioned, that the grapes that were being grown on the farm were going to this big cooperative and just being made into mass-produced, low-quality wine. And in the early 90s, my parents decided that they would basically make a U-turn and fix up the cellar and renovate the cellar on the farm, renovated the old tanks and the pumps and so on, and start making wine. And really my mother led the charge on the winemaking side, and with the help of my dad, Raul, on the vineyard side and the farming side. And I think it was 1994 we came out with our first vintage, and if I'm not mistaken, it was actually, I think it was a Pinotage and maybe a Chardonnay, and really went from there. And I was probably about 10 or 11 years of age when we started making wine on the farm, and I remember skipping school to get into the cellar and assist in making wine or bottling. And I mean, the whole production line was all the family members, being my brother and my sister and my parents, and we each had a job to do when we were bottling wine. And my brother then went on to study agriculture and winemaking in Stellenbosch at Elsenburg, which is the agricultural university, and decided to go and get involved into the family business. I think it's almost about 20 years ago. I lose count. And he's been there ever since, and subsequently has taken over the farm as the owner and winemaker, cellar master, and pretty much does everything from the farming side to the winemaking to the marketing. He's really a jack of all trades, and him and his family are obviously situated on the farm and continue with making really good wines, and allow me to live here as well.
I just quickly, I was going to say, when we were chatting to Justin earlier, Justin, you'd met the mum. She sounds like she worked incredibly hard.
No, you just need to unmute, Just.
Yeah. Jane was instrumental in building up the brand. I accompanied the distribution company with her, and we were at promotions around the country, up in Joburg, and she was immensely passionate and driven, and had a very natural approach with people, and you know, steadily that brand just built up over the years, and the quality spoke for itself. And she managed to get a big following early on. And I think in the early 2000s, that's when the brand really took off. And I think the packaging is also very attractive. It's very slick today. And the quality just so consistent. As I was saying earlier, the Shiraz I've tasted, the Pinotage, the Chenin Blanc, what I notice about those wines is the amazing balance. There's incredible harmony with the oak. The fruit is really is very expressive, and the alcohol's in check. You know, so it's a very cool area. You notice when you come down into the valley into Botrivier, the temperature drops as you leave Hohoek, which is just about 3-4 kilometers up. The temperature drops by 5 degrees as you approach the valley, and it's always like that. And I think that's remarkably good for those vineyards, because you get this even ripeness, which just means consistency of quality.
100%. I met Sebastian. I think the first time I met Sebastian is that him and 4 other of our, we call them crazies when we give our tours. 3 other winemakers and Sebastian started something called Spuchwein. Now, Spuchwein, and I'm not very good at Afrikaans, sounds remarkably like spit the wine out when you translate it directly, but it actually means brave wine. And these guys put in a little show, and you couldn't get into you couldn't get into Spuchwein unless you had some sort of contact. And there were about 50 or 60 people there. And if you think of a wine festival, it was in Tyrrell's. Tyrrell's, they've got like they've got the Justenburg little place where they do lunch now, the Kraal. But they had it there, and there were 4 barrels, and it was Adi Badenhorst, and it was Sebastian and Nikki. It was Adam Mason, and it was Tyrrell Myberg. And then there were 50 people. So basically, and then you had a huge meal afterwards, because wine goes with meals, and everyone raised a toast to the wine and to the food. And that's where I first met Sebastian. And then right after that, I was doing a paper for my Cape Wine Masters. And Sebastian, I needed to give a presentation to try and demonstrate the difference, stylistic difference between a wine that was inoculated with commercial yeasts and then one that had spontaneously fermented. And I used the samples from Sebastian, because they were grapes from the same place, same vines. And so he helped me immensely with that. And then just through using the Crazies tours and using the Beaumont and the Badenhorst wines in our tours, we don't say, oh, that's the Pinotage, 2016 Pinotage. We have a label, and it says Sebastian on it. And so when someone asks, you say, would you like the Sebastian or the Adi? And they say, well, what variety it is? It's not, it's him. He's here. Don't insult him. We'll just open some up for you. And that was also in the theme of the Spuchwein and the Crazies that we do. You know, there's a remarkable thing in South Africa. Lucien is a surfer. Sebastian's a surfer. And I reckon 90% of the winemakers in this country are surfers, to the extent that we have something in South Africa which is unique to South Africa. It's called the Vintners Classic. It's a surf competition, and the only way you can enter into the competition is if you're a winemaker or you're working in the wine industry. And it's been going for 20 years. It's not a fad. And I think that's remarkable. And it's also great when I love it when you know, we mix the adventure side of touring with the wine side, and giving a wine tasting made by winemakers that are surfers on the beach and then surfing is pretty cool. So yeah, and I mentioned that Sebastian's known as the Chenin Dude. Yeah, I think the surfing, but his Hope Marguerite has won so many 5 stars. We've got a Platter's Guide here in South Africa, and it just wins 5 stars all the time. I was I know Sebastian through some of his friends. There's the guy Norman Hardy from Ontario, from Canada. Maybe you know him. He knows Sebastian very well, and he was studying his winemaking in the Winelands, which is just down there. And I think he spent a lot of time with Sebastian, and also through Minos and Kath Gerakaris. They're making wines in Johannesburg. So that's another story where they get their vines. I think they got their grapes from Sebastian when they started, but now they transport those grapes up to Johannesburg and they make it in a city center, which is unheard of. They're the first. So, yeah, Sebastian gives a lot back.
Harry, just quickly on the crazies, because I know it's something that we've sort of focused on a lot. And what got me excited about the crazies is that they're not all young. So your cousin is a good example. At Marathi, but they're working on they're really mixing tradition with some bold new ways. And I think Sebastian's one of those. I mean, he's just not like I pictured a winemaker when I arrived, and he was in his sort of Rip Surf t-shirt and covered in red wine. I mean, do you think that's different to other areas, or is from what you've experienced, and what kind of effects it's having?
I mean, yeah, I think the way we define the crazies is people that are crazy enough to make a difference. And those 4 that I mentioned are, and there's a whole lot of others. I mean, Johan, all the guys we bring on our tours. And I think that it's a battle. I hope I'm answering your question, Adam. I think it's a battle for, in an industry that was run by the KWV, which was this huge co-op since 1918 till 1992 or 1994 or whatever. And it was all regulated. It was a monopoly, and yes, people could get guaranteed that their grapes would be bought, but it was just farming. It wasn't art. It wasn't the beauty of making wine. And I think that there's a lot of history and tradition in there. And I think to push against that, you've got to be a little bit crazy. And I think that the only way to push just by making quality wine, you're often pushing against that system. But there's a lot of people that are going out there. So the Spuch wine, I said it sounds like spit wine, but it means brave wine. They're showing wines that they don't often release, or wines that they're testing out with different oaking or stuff. And, you know, Sebastian was the first person in the country to make a single variety Mourvedre. So there's a lot of things being done to push boundaries. And
what does that mean?
Huh?
What is a single variety Mourvedre?
Mourvedre is a type of grape. It's a southern Rhone grape, and it's usually used as a blending partner because it's so big and tannic. And if you guys know Bordeaux, it's like making a single variety Petit Verdot. And it's used for spice usually, and a little bit of meatiness and some tannin structure. So to make a single variety is completely against the norm. And the Mourvedre, I don't know if I'm pronouncing, I'm not French, but that Sebastian makes is excellent. I remember the last time I walked into the 5-star platters, they have a red and a white where you get to go and taste all the wines. It was the first wine I tasted, and I said to Sebastian, Sebastian, you're standing right at the entrance with a bloody single variety Mourvedre. I'm possibly going to taste this, fall in love, but not be able to taste anything for the rest of the night. But it was delicious. It was superb. It was refined. It was brilliant. And so, yeah. So to answer your question, Ingram, I think these guys are integral to the wine industry. They've been integral in Oz. They've been integral all over the world. The garagistes in Bordeaux. And yes, they are getting old, but there are the young guns coming through. And I think that they have the revolutionaries. You know, revolution ends. They've driven the change, and now it's being implemented in all the farms. So all the ones that are going to succeed. So yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's sort of time to open up to some questions. If anyone, you know, we've got Lucian here, Justin, Harry. If anyone has got anything they want to fire out, don't be shy.
There's another thing to talk about is in South Africa we've got the Cape Winemakers Guild, and that's that's a selection of our best winemakers in the country. And in order to get onto there, you have to be invited, and you've had to have proved your wines over an extended period. And I just want to say that Sebastian is a Cape Wine, he's on the Cape Winemakers Guild. It's not many. And then, yeah, I mean, Lucian, am I giving justice to these stories, or am I?
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's great hearing them from someone else. And I mean, I think we're a pretty humble family and pretty low key for that matter. So a lockdown in South Africa doesn't really feel too bad for us, but it's you're absolutely spot on. And I think it's really driven by passion, and that was started by my parents, who were pretty fearless in going into something that they didn't know a lot about. They had some good advice from winemakers around us, but still had to take that leap of faith for themselves. And that's been instilled into my brother and I in terms of what we've done and in our own careers. And to this day, I think, you know, any wine and successful wine estate or farm in South Africa or worldwide, it's the story behind it. And I think, you know, 100%. When you've got an interesting story and you come out to the farm and you get to meet the family and interact with the family on a level basis, whereas you have that very authentic experience. Whereas you can go to many wine farms across South Africa, and they're big, fancy, luxurious places, but lack the authenticity that a small family-run business has, that specializes in making low quantities of high-quality wine, and yeah, just, you know, keeping humble, I think. Yeah.
No, I have to say, when you go to Beaumont, it's a favorite one for me to take my family, because your sister-in-law does all the food, so they do picnics, and so, you know, someone brings you some stuff, and you get chatting. You find they're one of the family, and then the kids have suddenly run off and they're playing on the dam with some other kids, and you find they're also Beaumonts. You know, do you ever leave the farm apart from yourself? Because whenever you go there, it seems the whole family's around one way or the other. And I mean, my kids have just run straight onto the stoep of your house and inside, and it seems very sort of, you know, you see, yeah, it's a very open household.
Absolutely. I mean, as we speak at the moment, in the lockdown that we are going through, we've had a German intern that's been working over the harvest the last few months, and she became friends with a whole bunch of other interns that worked in the Himalaya Valley and a couple of other wine farms around the area, and they all got stuck in South Africa. And my brother's basically opened up the farm to them. We've got 2 guest cottages on the farm, and I think it's 6 of them. They've all just moved in, and my brother's put them to work, from picking apples to picking olives to making a chicken coop. And it's like they're incredibly welcoming in that regard. So it's kind of like a whole commune out on the farm at the moment. This little island of during the lockdown.
Well, I've actually got a concerned question. Is there going to be a 2020 harvest in South Africa in general, or a Beaumont one?
Yeah, it's all done. So the farms have been allowed to keep operating in South Africa under lockdown, especially the food producing farms. My brother hasn't been able to export wine, although they've just passed the legislation that you can now start exporting wine again. He had pretty much finished harvest. I think he's got to finish his noble late harvest, I think in the next week or 2. And then he's done. So, and I think it's looking like it's going to be a really good year once again in terms of wine. And obviously we've just got to get it out there, and I'm sure lots of people will be ready to drink some wine after this whole thing has gone down. And I just wanted to bring up a story of something that we unfortunately missed out on this year. And it's just something that we kind of grew up with was stomping grapes with our feet as kids, and making that first little bit of wine back in the day, is that we've carried on that tradition. And it was actually the week of lockdown that it was going to happen. It's called the Port Stomp, and we do this every year. And we invite, I think it's about 100 people or so, and everybody comes out to the farm. It's on a Friday evening, and you basically come and stomp grapes that will be turned into fortified port wine, and you get a meal for that, and it's a really good evening, and it's just a very authentic experience and a fun experience where you can get stuck in the grapes, and they've got a little bit of live music, but very, very low key and fun experience. And unfortunately, we missed out on that this year.
I mean, I have to say it's something that I'm upset about. This is my first ever poor attempt of a beard with lockdown, but you've also cancelled your beard. What's that bearded festival? What's it called?
So the Barrels and Beards. So that's an annual festival that's been going on the last, I think, 7 years or so. I'm often on safari when all of these events go down, so I miss out on all of them. I've never been to a Vintners Surf Classic, and I've surfed for 30 years of my life. And it's not because they don't allow me in. It's just because I'm never around to take part in that surf contest. So the Barrels and Beards, it's actually all the local winemakers of the kind of Botch River area, which includes Gabriel's Kloof, Wildekrans, Barton, Luddite, and a few others. And basically, all the winemakers from those farms and some of the employees will meet on the first day of harvest at the local hotel, where there's a little kind of pub, and they shave their beards. They have to be clean shaven at the start of harvest. And I mean, they obviously cut themselves some pretty weird hairstyles as well. And then they have to grow their beards throughout the harvest period. They're not allowed to shave at all, or they have to at least try and, keep it as impressive as possible. And then at the end of harvest, which comes towards the end of April, we have this Barrels and Beards evening, which is an evening of food and wine and comedy. And each winemaker has to then put on a comical skit of some sort. And they all get judged on how magnificent their beards have grown over the harvest season. So it's just a really fun way to kind of celebrate the end of harvest. And it's a great community of winemakers that we have out in this area, a very small but very tight-knit community. And we all kind of look after each other in that way. And everybody sells grapes to one another and allows cellar space in each other's cellars and so on. So it's a lot of fun. I'm not growing my beard because of Barrels and Beards. I just always have a beard.
No, I think that's the nice thing, and a big thank you to Beaumont and what Harry does in terms of getting us into getting us to experience some of this stuff that goes on. And if we've got guests with us, they can as well. Just one thing, because I'm obviously conscious everyone's got probably nowhere to go, but stuff to do. Just Harry and the other wine guys here, in terms of if like we were talking about pinotages this evening. In terms of North America, if you're looking for South African pinotages to search in the shops, are there any sort of goodies other than obviously the Beaumont one that you would look out for?
So I'd look for Beaumont. I'm pretty sure that Canon Corp's around. Laveniers definitely, because it's owned by a French company. Bears Kloof, but it depends on the levels that you're looking for. So I don't know.
So Harry, when you say levels, because that was another question that I was asked. You were saying like new pinotages, and what do you what do you mean by the levels?
Levels of wine is different. So new and old are stylistically how the pinotage has changed as the years have gone by, and how it's been made stylistically different. levels of wine are your premium fine wines, your premium category, but most wine farms would also make a sort of lifestyle range, and some will actually make a pure commercial range. And everyone's got different business models. So if you look at Canon Corp, they'll have the Cadet range, which is the lifestyle range. It's still bloody good. I mean, they're like a really good winery. Same with Bayer's Kloof. So it depends what you're looking for. I mean, you're more likely to get the lifestyle range than the fine wine range, because obviously it's more exclusive, and you've got to find it in more boutique kind of shops. I don't know where you can get the wines overseas, because I'm not there, and I know that it's quite a complex beast, especially in the US. I don't know about Canada in terms of the different states having different regulations and all that kind of stuff.
I just was going to ask how many guys were able to. I know we didn't give you much time, but those of you that were able to get Beaumont prior to the. I know there's at least one that had one in her wine rack, but was anybody else able to purchase it prior to today, or was there just not enough time? If you were, chime in, give us a cheers.
I actually checked it out online, and there are some Beaumonts available at the LCBO. It's Lucien. It's not my favorite place. You know, they run that place. You know, if you don't deliver 10,000 cases, then they won't deal with you. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Oops. What happened?
Which is available for $30 at the LCBO.
So that's the French Chateau Beaumont. And that's got nothing to do with us.
Okay, I just did a quick search. Yeah. So no, Harry, is there any notes? Like, you know, I will check the LCBO for these wines. If you can just reiterate.
I'll send a list through to Tad, and he can send it out of Beaumont's wines. Or if you want Pinotage, I can tell you where the main Pinotage.
Harry, give us your favorite. Give us your favorite Pinotage. If I'm putting you on the spot,
I've said it already. One. My favorite is Beaumont from A Cool Climate, and then from Stellenbosch, it's the Lavinier.
Yeah, we'll send out Harry's top 5. After this to everybody who's attended, and Cindy is the one who had a lovely Beaumont Pinotage from 2014 already in her wine rack.
That was a good year.
So
I was at your spot. You know, there's a Paul Kluver concert with Watershed, and we all came in and we were in your cellar. And I think the one girl who was helping us actually is doing a Cape Wine Masters course. And I think she poured the last bottle, or I don't know, she's sure she's hidden some, of the 2014 Dangerfield Syrah Shiraz. And we were like giving her troubles, and she was
Cindy,
brilliant.
I hope you're not drinking it, because it sounds like it's one to keep. Sounds like it's a keeper.
The only Pinotage I could find at my LCBO was a clip-on cup.
Okay, so that's the sort of
the same one I'm drinking.
Can the Canadians define what LCBO is?
Liquor Control Board of Ontario.
Oh wow!
So that would be that clip-on cup would sort of be your medium sort of chocolatey coffee style, I'm guessing.
It's very tasty. I was just happy to have something similar to what you guys might be having right now.
I just want to explain something, because I'm just listening to Lucien, and it's the same style as Sebastian, who I know better. And if you look on the Beaumont bottle, if you've ever got it, there's a family emblem there.
Put it up, Josh. You've got it with you. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, he's gone.
There, the Beaumont emblem.
Yeah.
And I can't read it, but I know what it stands for. It says Erectus non elatus, and it means, Lucien, I hope I don't butcher this, but it says be proud but not arrogant.
Exactly.
Let's replace arrogant with confident.
There we go. So and it comes through whenever you go there. You actually feel it as you're walking into the. Everyone who works there, it's the same personality, and it's so interesting because I've I've given maybe 12 of these things and to a similar group locally. And we have the winemakers on. And what people are starting to realize, they don't know the wines that well, is that the wineries have personalities. It's not just the wines that have personality, and not just the winemaker or the owner or whatever. The actual wineries have personalities. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those wineries that have personality. And the personality is the same. It's the values, the ethos of whoever's running it, or the business model or whatever. And so Beaumont family, storytelling, low key, but authentic. It's
No, I mean,
amazing.
I think, yeah, I think this is 3 weeks of lockdown with 3 kids under 10. The thought of going on that Beaumont walk now, and and it's an open invite to anyone when they come over. We'll steer the educational to Beaumont. That walk, I mean, what was it, an hour and a half, Lucian? But we were stopping continuously.
I think we walked pretty quickly. That first day, it usually takes probably about 2 hours or so. But I mean, I remember, because I know that area very well, obviously. But we stopped off in the middle of the mountains and basically got dropped off there. And for you not knowing where you are, like, we just started walked over a railway line and then into the mountains. And I think that's kind of what I wanted to create, was that sense of arrival and that build up to arriving on the farm, because you arrive in the mountains off the highway and start walking, not really knowing where you are and who is this crazy bearded guide that's leading you through the mountains, showing you leopard tracks and black eagles and so on, and then landing up on the farm for a home cooked meal and a wine tasting and a swim in the dam, and a couple of stories from the family. I think it's a great experience, and it's something as a guide I've always wanted to bring into my trips in the Cape and bringing my guests out, on a wine safari. You can go to the luxury farms, you can go to the authentic farms, and really have a great mix of all of them.
Yeah, no, and I thank you for also showing our guides the routes as well, so we can keep on the tradition, because it's a winner, and it's a shame more people aren't going out to that area, because it's obviously the big focus is Franschhoek and Stellenbosch.
It's coming.
But they're all like the stories we've heard about Sebastian and Lucian's family next door, the Luddite wine, and I mean they're it's all very homely, but still the wines will then, when you're in the restaurants in the evenings, are at the top of the list. So they're sort of lesser known. Sorry, just to wrap up, I think just for go on.
No, I was just wanting to say, like, my brother, he's always wanted to keep it very, very low key, and I keep going on about it. But for example, he has never widened the driveway into the farm that you could drive a tour bus in. So he never wanted it to be like a mass of people arriving on the farm. It's always very personal, individual, and kind of staying off the beaten track for the most part, and not wanting that notoriety of being, the place for everybody to be. It's, you've got to do a little bit of digging to be able to find it and get out there and visit something that's really authentic and unique and not, be overrun by lots of other tourists at the same time.
Cool. What I want to do also for Tad, if you can get a picture, Tad, is to raise our glasses. I still feel very bad having this white, but I'm blaming it on my wife. And just to say a big thanks for everyone for coming.
Thank you.
And also just to see us through this time. I mean, it's been one hell of a roller coaster for everyone. And really appreciate Lucian jumping on, Harry, your time, Josh and Justin staying up late, but mostly, Tad for organizing it, but for everyone for coming. And if people enjoyed it, let Tad know. Don't let me know if you didn't enjoy it. I'll take it personally, but let Tad know either way. And then we'd love to do another one and maybe bring another one of the crazies in and hear a few stories, so that we can keep doing virtual wine tours going. And it's a nice excuse to stay up to midnight drinking wine. from our side. So thanks very much, guys, and it's been lovely to see some familiar faces.
Thanks, Harry. Thanks, Lucian.
For those of you that are camera shy, turn your cameras on for a second and choose us so I can get a good shot, a full screen of these Zoom meetings with your wine glass raised, please.
Reasons why we love New Frontiers.
And also, to your good health, and stay safe, and I hope this funny time ends soon.
Hear, hear. All right, I think we got a good one, guys. Thanks so much for joining us today. Like I said, we're going to do more of these as long as this lockdown continues in South Africa, and the rest of us are carrying on with quarantine here in North America. So thanks for taking some time.
Thank you.
Twisting your arm to drink wine.
Everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thanks guys, for sticking.
Pleasure, guys. Thanks very much.